moved across.
Into it, so she loved the lodge as well, didn't she?
Oh, yes,
she loved
yes.
all those parts of it, and she was, as we've been saying, the Queen of Scotland too. So it wasn't just Balmoral; it was connections that she had with all the places that her coffin and cortege are now passing through.
And I mean, let us not forget that her mother was Scottish. I mean, the Queen Mother was, you know, was a Bowes-Lion from Glamis Castle, and so really huge ancestry of Scotland. I mean, they'd absolutely loved it. I mean, you never saw the Queen going abroad on a holiday. You know, she always went up to Scotland. And as Emily said, she had the grandchildren, great-grandchildren there. We've seen pictures of them all going out on ponies, and, you know, she could sort of do all this so sort of privately, and the Scottish people always respected her privacy, which was so lovely. It must have been sort of a wonderful phase of every year, and also quite busy. I mean, the Queen used to have a lot of people to stay, and even recently there were people being entertained there. You know, it was obviously because of her advanced age, slightly less than usual, but I mean, there were people coming and going the whole time.
And famously, over the years, of course, the Prime Ministers would get that nerve-wracking invite and go up and have to find themselves a stout pair of shoes if they didn't own some, and deal with life there on her terms, in the way she liked to be.
A rather wonderful Canadian commentator said on a speech the other day how wonderful it was that the Queen had intimidated 14 Prime Ministers, and rather wished that Mr Trump had been put through a similar process. I don't think she intended to. She was very, very supportive of them. But I can see that there was that slight relationship of sort of, you know, going to see the headmistress and you know...
And also, I think, particularly there in Scotland and in Balmoral, there was a feeling of, we're not going to be prestige. You have to cope with marching around. You have to cope with the life that she felt most comfortable in, which was essentially a country life, wasn't it?
Well, yes, I mean, for example...
Don't come with your high heels if you're the wife of a foreign dignitary.
No, but the thing is that, of course, if you're a Commonwealth Prime Minister, you're expected to kind of call on the Queen when you come to England. And once she was in Scotland, Paul Keating, that rather controversial Australian Prime Minister, came over, and I think he went up to Scotland expecting a sort of banquet, and he ended up with one of Prince Philip's barbecues, you know, lots of midgies around, and he got quite a surprise.
Yes, a very different way than they might have thought it was along the way. When she left, it was often the case that autumn hadn't started, and she would look back rather wistfully, thinking, gosh, I'd love to see these trees in full blaze of autumn colours. I wonder if this year, because we've had a false early autumn, she might have got a little glimmer of that.
That is possible. I mean, you're absolutely right, because I remember a letter from the Queen Mother saying that the autumn tints were just beginning to appear as they went south. But, you know, they had their job to do, and they were lucky to be able to spend so much time up there.
Yeah.
And when they came down, it was business as usual.
And to crack on with it all. Well, there you go, that scene that we're looking at. We're bringing you this live of the Queen's coffin and the cortege making its way from Balmoral, as we've seen already, passing along that road, the A93, and heading next to Aberdeen and then on to Edinburgh, where Louise Scott is waiting outside St Giles Cathedral, which will be the place where she rests for a while in Scotland before going on to see her lying in state, won't it, Louise?
It will be still a few hours before the coffin does arrive in Edinburgh, and it will pass by us here along the Royal Mile. It will pass by St Giles Cathedral today, down to the Palace of Holyrood House, where she will lie overnight, giving staff there a chance to pay tribute. Staff that will have worked with her just a couple of months ago when she had her week at Holyrood House. And it will then be on Monday, once the King and Queen Consort come to Edinburgh, that a procession will then take the Queen's coffin up to St Giles Cathedral, staying there for around 24 hours. There'll be a service as the coffin arrives. Then the King Charles III and other members of the royal family will hold a vigil from 7 p.m. around the Queen's coffin. That's called the Vigil of the Princes. And members of the public will be able to file past to pay their respects. But today in Edinburgh, before the Queen's coffin does arrive, we actually will have the proclamation of the King. Behind me here, you can see the Market Cross, and that is where that will happen at midday, alongside these regional proclamations in Cardiff and Belfast. And if you watched the proclamations in London yesterday, a very similar process happening here today. It's happening a day after London. It has really historical roots because in days gone by, this message would have been taken by horse and cart travelling up the country. Of course, people knowing the news already, but a real historical moment happening here today. And already, it means security barriers are down the Royal Mile, up to the castle and right down to the Palace of Holyrood House. Already people lining, not just from Scotland, not just from the UK, but from all over the world as they want to watch this moment, which will happen at midday, and then, of course, pay respect to the Queen as her coffin arrives nearer 4 o'clock. Well, I'm joined by a family, the Mourne family, who have travelled quite a distance this morning to be here. Michael, where have you come from, and what time did you leave this morning?
So we've come from South Shields this morning. We set off a little bit after 5 o'clock. Just really wanted to take the opportunity to come and be involved in such a momentous occasion. The news of the death of the Queen really upset us all, and so we wanted to take the opportunity to come up here, lay a floral tribute at Holyrood, and come and witness the proclamation of the new King as well. So,
have you been down to Holyrood?
We were at Holyrood this morning, yeah, where we were able to see some of the floral tributes and lay our own. And of course, I wanted the kids to be able to be part of this as well. It's really important for them.
Yes, Ellen and Anna here. Ellen, what did the Queen mean to you? What did you like about the Queen?
Well, I liked that she was really devoted, and she promised to be devoted, and then she kept the promise.
And Anna, you've been learning a little bit more about what's been happening the past few days in school. What have you been learning there?
We had an assembly about the Queen, and there was a few photos, and we watched the one with Paddington in, and watched a bit of the news round about her death.
Yes, the Queen had a good sense of humour. Was that something that you liked about her?
Yeah.
What else did you like particularly about the Queen?
Because she made a promise when she first became Queen, and she kept that promise throughout her life.
And Michael, we are going to have the proclamation first, but then of course later in the day we will see the coffin passing by. How are you feeling about that moment?
Yeah, of course. It's something that's why we made the journey this morning. We really wanted to be involved.
He's picked from Balmoral. Travel with her.
I think maybe for a moment we have just lost Louise there. I'm sure she'll rejoin us. While she does, let us continue to look at those images of the Queen's coffin and the cortege passing through the towns as it makes its way along the A93 and heading towards Aberdeen, probably about 15 minutes away from Aberdeen now. And then we'll see the procession continue on, as we were saying, to Edinburgh. While we just look at that procession, I want to just bring in Emily, Hugo and Chris as well to talk as we look at that, because it is a strange day in many ways, because it's a day when we're focused on the mourning of the Queen in an official way. Of course, many have been mourning from the moment they heard the terrible news. But also there are important things that are taking place even as the mourning gets under its official procession to do with the accession, aren't there? We know that King Charles will be in Edinburgh to be with the Queen tomorrow, but at the moment, here in London, he is still continuing on, meeting with the Secretary-General of the Commonwealth at Buckingham Palace, hosting the countries of which he is head of state, formally the palace's ballroom as well, making sure that that situation is managed carefully. And then even tomorrow morning, when you'd think he might have the chance to move directly to the mourning of his mum, let's not forget that that's who she is, as well as our Queen. He will begin the day with a visit to Westminster Hall to hear the House of Parliament will meet to express their condolences. And then begin the journey by air up to Edinburgh. So it's the brilliance of our system in many ways, isn't it, Hugo, that we have this structure in place to manage all sides of it and give the chance for the genuine sorrow and the need, if you like, constitutionally for things to move forward.
It's a very smooth transition, and it's very different from 1952. The Queen didn't have to do all the things that the new King is doing by any means.
Why not? Why was it different then?
I think this time there's a real feeling that he must be seen throughout Britain, and, you know, and also we've seen him doing walkabouts and meeting the people, and I think that side of life has been very important. I mean, I remember seeing the programme some years ago and thinking how daunting it must be for him. He has very, very little private time at all up until the funeral. But perhaps that's a good thing, perhaps to keep him busy. But it also, I mean, the way he's been received has been so extraordinary and reassuring.
I agree with Hugo, and I'm sure you will want to have your view on the fact that it looked to me in those images that we saw the day before yesterday, that he really wanted to go straight away from the second he arrived at Buckingham Palace, not go through the gates, but go straight to the people. And again, we saw that yesterday, and also from his sons.
Yes, but I mean, the warmth of the reaction to him was very, very touching. And of course, the speech that he made, I mean, had such gravitas. I mean, he really spoke as a king. And in a way, slightly differently from the way he's sometimes spoken to us in the past, he actually was so recognising that the world was grieving with him, and he was so sympathetic to all of us. I mean, we should be being sympathetic towards him. But
and
he was so
got that from the crowd, didn't he?
He did.
I was watching very closely. I was there and was watching. Every single person began with, "We're so sorry for your loss. We're thanking you." The expressions were one of wanting to give them his love, which can only have been a huge comfort to him, Emily, because he would have been wondering, because of comments and events that have happened over the last 7 decades while he's been waiting to become King Charles III, that might have made him wonder.
Absolutely. I think the transition from one monarch to another is always can be a very destabilising time for the country. At the moment, we've just had quite a destabilising leadership election for a new Prime Minister. The country's having a little bit of an identity crisis, some might say. So I think it's very important that we see our new King and that he feels the support and the love from his people in a kind of symbiotic... It is a symbiotic relationship, the monarch and the people and the monarch. So I thought it was very important that he did that first walkabout outside Buckingham Palace on Friday. And I think he was really buoyed, and it really means something to him to speak to his people, to hear their emotion, to hear the condolences for his mother. And I think what's really interesting is that although he has emphasised in his speech both to the nation on Friday and in his more formal speech on Saturday to the Accession Council, he's emphasised how he will continue the continuity and the stability of his mother's record-breaking long reign. He's also showing us what a modern monarch he's going to be. He's quite emotional. He's given us those glimpses into his private grief. He talked about how much his beloved mama, how sad the family are. When he met Prime Minister Liz Truss for the first time, he knew cameras were there. He said to Liz, in full view of the cameras, knew they would be heard, it was the day he'd been dreading. He's so grief-struck. So I think it's very interesting that we have been allowed to see into his personal grief in a way that we would not have ever seen the Queen emote so publicly. And then, of course, I was astonished when his car stopped on the way back from Buckingham Palace to Clarence House yesterday afternoon. The car stopped, at his insistence. He got out. His police protection officers probably thought, oh, my goodness, what's happening? And he sort of plunged into the crowd to talk to the people.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right. It was a wonderful moment and a feeling of I'm putting a capital letter at the start of what I want my reign to be, and I want you all to know that I understand your grief too. We're still continuing to watch that journey of the cortege down the A93. Emma Murphy, I'm sure, is keeping an eye on it too. She's at Holyrood House, where the coffin will arrive in around 6 hours. And I'm sure there's already expectation. I'm sure plans are already in place of what will happen there. Aren't there, Emma?
Indeed, the feeling here, as you would imagine, is incredibly sombre this morning, but there is also a sense of expectation and obligation and a real feeling that whatever happens over the next 48 hours, what is most important is that this country does everything it can to offer a fitting tribute to a woman who meant so much to this country and who valued this country so very much. And I think there is a feeling here that if the Queen was to pass away anywhere, they feel that it was appropriate that it was here in Scotland, that they are able to really acknowledge the importance of Scotland to her. And the fact that this was where members of her family have said that she was happiest. And, you know, we often associate the royal family and the Queen with London, with Buckingham Palace. But actually this was such a very important part of all of their lives, and now will be held in a very special place in their hearts, given what they've endured here and who they lost here. And I was up in Balmoral for the last few days and drove towards Edinburgh last night, and I was struck on that beautiful journey that the cortege is now wending its way along the roads, you know, between the forests and the glens alongside the river. I was struck by just how many punctuation marks there are on that route where the Queen played a part in the communities there. So, you know, one of the first bridges she'll pass over is the King George VI Bridge, named after her father. And then as she gets down to Aberdeen, the Children's Hospital, which she opened. How many lives has that hospital impacted? How many people watching these scenes today will look at their children and think about the fact that their children are potentially with them now and remember that day that that hospital was opened by the monarch? And then as the cortege wends further down south, you know, it'll pass Dice. That's where she opened the oil pipeline, bringing such industry to Scotland, bringing jobs and prosperity. And then further along, further south, we have the more personal places that will be treasured by the royal family. Glamis Castle, where the Queen Mother had her maternal home and where Princess Margaret was born. All these places so incredibly important in the life of the Queen, and now, as she leaves Scotland for the last time, incredibly important for those who travel in that huge cortege. I was also thinking that actually along the way, they're not that far from St Andrews, where William and Kate, and now Prince and Princess of Wales, met, and where the Queen joined them for their graduation. A small moment in life, but you know, however big you are as a family, they are still incredibly important family moments, and that was one that they shared there. And then as they moved closer to Edinburgh, crossing places like the Queensferry Bridge, she opened that. So all of the route is in some way reflective of what happened in her life and the part she played in this country and this country played to her. And I was just reading that above the coffin are flowers taken from Balmoral, some of the Queen's favourites, dahlias and sweet peas. So they will come here to Edinburgh, and then when she arrives here at Holyrood Palace, she will be greeted by the Royal Regiment. There will be the Royal Salute, and then the pallbearers will take her inside the palace, the smallest of her palaces, and it will be here that the staff who've known her over so many years will be able to stop and reflect. The staff and former staff at Balmoral have been able to do that over the last few days, and there was a feeling amongst the royal family that it was so important that all the staff who had played a part in her life had that opportunity.
Emma, thank you very much. I know we'll be rejoining you later, but I'm going to take you now to Buckingham Palace, the place which will be part of the long mourning process that we are all trying to take a moment to be respectful for. Already I can see there Chloe with the flowers, and of course the Queen's coffin will come back to Buckingham Palace, not until Tuesday, so it's got a long journey ahead. But meanwhile, while it continues that journey, there are other things that are taking place, aren't there? We've talked already this morning about those two things continuing at the same time, the important moments of the accession and the pauseful moments for mourning. And it's an important day ahead for the King, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And King Charles will be returning to Buckingham Palace later today. Already here this morning, we have lots and lots of people who have come because they want to be part of this mourning process, of this moment in history. And what's really striking this morning is just the sheer numbers of people here. I was here all day yesterday. There were thousands upon thousands of people arriving then, but even when I arrived first thing this morning, there were already more than there were at that time yesterday. And of course, many of them want to come and bring flowers. And it's actually this area of Green Park that they're now being asked to bring those flowers to. I don't know if you can see behind me, but they're actually being arranged into sort of little islands so that people can not just lay their flowers, but walk around amongst them and take their time to read the messages, to look at the drawings and the pictures, and take their time to reflect on the life of the Queen. Well, I've got Charlotte, Jackson and Millie with me here. You've all come today to bring some flowers for the Queen. Can you tell me, Charlotte, first of all, why you wanted to come here today, but also why you wanted to come with your children?
I think it's really important. The Queen's been such a huge part of everyone's lives that we come and show some respect and lay some flowers and mark her passing, and it's something that they're always going to remember for the rest of their lives when they're old, that we came and did this. I just think it's really important.
And Jackson, you've been learning a bit about the Queen in school this week, haven't you? Why did you feel you wanted to come and be here today?
It's just that the Queen meant so much to the UK and the Commonwealth. It's just an important thing that we'll remember forever.
Yeah.
And,
How would you describe the Queen? What did you think about her?
well, she's really kind, first of all, and she just helps the UK so much.
Yeah. Millie, did you bring some flowers for the Queen?
Yeah.
What did you bring? What colour were they?
There was some pink ones.
And how would you describe the Queen? What did you think about her?
She was very kind and she meant lots to me.
Well, thank you all very much for speaking to me. I appreciate it. It's not just here that crowds are gathering, as we saw yesterday and we're seeing again today. It's closer to the palace and it's along the Mall as well, where, of course, last night the King actually went to meet some of them. We saw him getting out of his car, walking around and shaking hands with people in the crowd. As I was saying earlier, he will be coming back here today. He's due to travel from Clarence House to Buckingham Palace, where at 2 o'clock he'll receive the Secretary-General of the Commonwealth, and then at 2:30 he'll hold a reception with the High Commissioners of the realm, so in other words, the countries of which he is king. And then tomorrow, the King and the Queen Consort will travel together to Westminster, where, as is traditional, both Houses of Parliament will meet to express their condolences for the death of the Queen.
Yes, and while you were chatting with those lovely people that were there trying to piece together their own thoughts, and that feeling that they mentioned there was very much, wasn't it, what we've been hearing from everybody. Whatever happens, you just want to be there to mark your respect. We're going to see that, aren't we, as the official mourning continues and people line up to have the chance to view the Queen as she lies in state. And also the official business, as you also mentioned, that King Charles has today, is an important one. I wonder if you're aware or you know what his motivation will be. I'm imagining that it's to steady the ship as regards meeting those heads of state from the Commonwealth and the Secretary-General. We know that Australia has already said there will be no talk, the Prime Minister very clear, there'll be no talk of any referendums on the monarchy. But just moments after Charles III was confirmed as king, and also king of Antigua and Barbuda and other places around the world, the Caribbean country's Prime Minister there immediately said that he plans to hold a referendum on becoming a republic within 3 years. So it is important work that King Charles will be having to do today in steadying that, won't it? Whilst he also deals with the mourning.
That's right, very important work. The Commonwealth and the realm mean a great deal to King Charles. They meant a great deal to his mother. So those meetings will be very important to him. But as you say, he will have lots of other things on his mind as well. And just going back to your earlier question, I think that's right, what you said about people wanting to be a part of that mourning process, to share in that with him, if you like. And I think a lot of people I've spoken to over the last couple of days have said how they do feel as though they've lost a member of their own family. So I think people are really feeling that with the King. They are sharing that with him, and they want to be here, to come down, to be part of this moment in history, and to be part of this mourning process.
Absolutely. Chloe, thank you very much indeed. I'm sure we'll be returning to Buckingham Palace as those people gather there. And I was there myself yesterday, and it's a feeling of coming to the place which we've seen over the years, haven't we, Emily and Chris, as I'm lucky enough, actually, my route to work takes me past that, sometimes on the back of a motorbike, so not particularly in a royal way. But you can't help always wanting to just glance and think, I wonder if I'll see her. That is that urge that comes from childhood, that the Queen is at Buckingham Palace, and people still feeling that way this morning. Talking about the succession, Chris, because I know that you've got to go soon as we watch these images of the cortege flowing. One of my favourite pictures, which just shows, I think it's 4 generations of succession, is one you took. And it was the Queen mixing the puddings with all her family around her. I think we could have a little look at that at a moment. We'll all remember it. It was at Christmas, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was for the Royal British Legion, and it was, I suppose, it's one of those examples of a picture that has historical significance, because you've got the heirs to the throne, you've got Prince George there mixing the Christmas pudding, and if you look very closely, you can see some corgis on the Christmas tree behind. But it was a lovely moment, but with that historical significance. And for me as a photographer, I always enjoy capturing those more candid moments, and I think you get a little bit of a glimpse into people's personalities rather than the more formal portraits quite often. But this was a lovely kind of celebratory moment, and the Queen's obviously getting stuck in here, helping with the...
And one that families everywhere will do, you know, that moment where everybody has to stir the pudding, which is just so wonderful. And there you have the Queen, now King Charles III, and now Prince of Wales in William, and therefore little George, who is, you know, waiting there.
He's
to be
next in line. I mean, I've got to compliment Chris. It's an absolutely stunning photograph. Chris is an amazing photographer. But what's brilliant in this photograph is not just the personal, it's a family, it's making Christmas puddings. And, you know, there's one of your pictures, Chris, where the Queen sort of slightly leans back in slight horror when George is, you know, too vigorously stirring the pudding and she doesn't want to get covered in the currants. You've got the personal, but also here, it's an iconic picture because it shows what these 4 senior members of the royal family understand what monarchy is all about. The Queen, Charles, William and George in time. Monarchy is not about self. The Queen and Charles understood, and William understands, that celebrity is all about the promotion of self. Monarchy is all about using that fame, using that platform for the promotion of others. This photograph was actually to raise awareness for the British Legion, which raises money for those people who have served in the military. The Queen is head of the armed forces. Our King Charles is now head of our armed forces. Our Queen served in the army during World War II. And I think that brilliant picture by Chris perfectly encapsulates the personal, but also what it means to be monarch, to use your position to raise up others, to promote others, to raise money for charity, to promote the work that every person, every member of the military, living and dead, has done. And that's why it's so significant, the Queen's death. She is the last link with that war generation. There are still people alive who served in the Second World War. My grandfather died earlier this year. He served in the Second World War, was a prisoner of war. And I know that for the passing of the Queen is that passing the generation. She was that thread that took us from the 20th century, the deprivations of war, to the 21st century, the social media age. And I think that is why her passing, her death, is so significant in a kind of cultural, societal way.
And actually, Prince William made that in his statement, didn't he, yesterday, that she taught him that sense of duty, which was from a bygone age, but was relevant to now and to all ages. And that, you feel, is something that he really wants to bring to his time of Prince of Wales. He had that clarity, I'm sure, from his father, but also from his grandmother.
Absolutely.
And the fact that she was there during his darkest days too. But that sense of the past, you feel all of them coming together. And in fact, we saw Harry, William, Meghan and Catherine all together to really take that forward for all of us. That's what we love about what they do, isn't it?
Absolutely, and there's that kind of constant narrative, the past and the future. There's a lovely moment yesterday when the new Princess of Wales, Catherine, was talking to the crowds, and she, I think in response to a question, said that little Louis, who's only 4, had said, when they obviously had to break the news that Gangan, that Granny, as Prince William calls her, had died, little Louis said, well, at least Granny will be with great-grandpa now. I mean, just absolutely heartbreaking. Chris and I were talking earlier about how we break the news to our own children. We've both got young children. My children are similar age to the Cambridge children. And it's a really difficult thing to do, to have to tell them and how to pitch it. And I just thought that was such a moving moment. Little Louis saying, oh, well, at least she'll be in heaven with great-grandpa. I mean, and apparently the lady that Catherine spoke to, Catherine was really welling up as well. It's very emotional. Of course,
it would touch her, and remembering, I'm sure William did, that actually it was the Queen that had to be part of those that broke the news to him about his own mother.
At Balmoral.
Well, look, we're looking at the images of the coffin, the cortege, having left Balmoral, now coming up to Banchory, which, if geography serves you well, is about halfway to Aberdeen. And then we will see the procession continue. So there you go. That's where we think that the cortege has got to so far. But it started in Balmoral. Richard Gaisford was there and brought us the scenes in silence as it left Balmoral. And let's go back to him now. It was silence, wasn't it, that everybody felt instinctively they needed to fall into. How is the feeling there now?
Yeah, it was quite emotional, actually, to turn round and suddenly see the hearse come through the gates. We've been preparing ourselves, of course, for this moment for a number of days now, but to suddenly have the Queen's coffin pass you so very close, quite stirring. We're not the only ones here, of course. Outside of Balmoral, people are lining that route down to Ballater. You saw those amazing scenes there, and now on towards Aberdeen. But some of the first people I saw arrive here this morning to pay their tributes were former Royal Navy personnel, former Royal Marines, amongst them Fiona, James, Paul and Clive, who join me here now, Kate. And Fiona, it was really important for you to be here, wasn't it?
It certainly was. In the armed forces, if you lose an oppo, there's a saying which is called fair winds and calm seas, and we wish it on everyone that passes, and it was only fair that we came to see our boss and to wish her the same on her future journey.
Yeah, and James, you served on the Royal Yacht Britannia.
That's correct. Yes.
For how long, and you saw the Queen regularly?
Yes, I served 13 years on the Royal Yacht Britannia from 1985 right through until the decommissioning. And yes, I met the Queen a few times, and like every time she joined the ship, we were all lined up on the deck, and it was, you know, proud moment to serve in the Royal Yacht Britannia and in the Royal Navy as well. So.
And when you left, I know you had a private meeting with the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh. So when you saw the hearse today, what was going through your mind?
Well, there was lots of things going through my mind, you know, just remembering the, you know, the times that I did see her and stuff like that, and it was just a proud moment for me as well, just seeing her on her final journey, and it was pretty emotional. So.
And Paul, I mean, yeah, almost every organisation you've served in, she's been the boss, hasn't she?
Well, I joined the Royal Marines Cadets at 11, joined the Royal Marines as soon as I was 16. then went into Scottish Ambulance Service. Now I work with the RNLI, and she's been my boss that whole period of time. So it's going to be strange that she's not going to be there.
And of course, we'd all prepared ourselves for a time when she wouldn't be with us. But to see the hearse pass you so close today, how did you feel?
Well, it was a privilege and an honour to be invited up to actually be the first people that the hearse would go past when she went around the corner, just at the end of the road here. And it was quite emotional when she drove past us to see her go by. And brought a few tears to a few glass eyes, as they say.
And Clive at the back here, I mean, a fabulous kilt, by the way, I have to say, and your outfit is spectacular this morning. But being together is important for ex-service personnel.
It's the camaraderie. We serve together, we keep friendships together, and we pay our respects together. And for our own, and especially for Her Majesty the Queen.
And now we know that she's on that final journey and that this place was so important to her. You now have a new king, effectively, as the head of all of your organisations.
Our oath of allegiance was to Her Majesty the Queen and her successors, and it stands the same with all service personnel.
Well, I very much appreciate your time this morning. It's been wonderful meeting you all, and I know how difficult it's been for so many people, very emotional. And Kate, we're going to see those scenes continue throughout the morning as people stand outside of their homes on the roads along to Aberdeen. In Aberdeen, we're going to see a gathering there of dignitaries. The coffin will pause, people having a chance to pay their respects before it moves down the road to Dundee. Again, a chance for people to come together and then crossing the Queensferry Bridge, having gone round the outskirts of Perth. The coffin will make its way to Edinburgh. 2 days of laying in state there before the Queen's body is flown from Edinburgh on Tuesday to London. And of course, we then get 4 days of lying in state in Westminster before the funeral on Monday.
Richard, thank you. We're just looking images of the cortege passing through Banchory live, which is about halfway on that journey to Aberdeen. Some people there, just as Richard was saying, at every spot they have along the way, lining the streets, pausing just to fall into a natural silence of respect. Some applauding as well the life that she lived. Neil Connery is in Edinburgh, our ITV correspondent, and he is waiting for the cortege to come there, and I'm sure the preparations are well underway, and maybe even some people are gathering, are they, Neil?
Yes, the crowds have been gathering here this morning on the Royal Mile. We have first the Scottish proclamation of King Charles III, which will take place at noon, not far from where I am, just behind St Giles Cathedral, is the Mercat Cross, the market cross where that proclamation will be read out. You can see the Royal Mile drifting off into the distance behind me here, the Firth of Forth in the distance there, and the cortege later in the afternoon, when it arrives in Edinburgh, will make its way down this historic Royal Mile down to the Palace of Holyrood House, where Her Majesty will lie in rest tonight before another procession tomorrow afternoon, which will include King Charles and the Queen Consort, as the Queen's coffin is brought back here to St Giles Cathedral, the High Kirk, the parish church, if you like, of the old town of Edinburgh, for this service of prayer and reflection tomorrow. And then the Queen will lie in rest in the cathedral, with the public given an opportunity to pay their respects and file past the coffin for around 24 hours before Her Majesty is then flown by the RAF from Edinburgh Airport down to London.
Which will be a chance, I'm sure, Neil, for those there to have a moment to line and the streets and watch and see and say goodbye to people and say goodbye to the Queen that's had such a strong connection for them for so long.
Definitely. Definitely. I think one aspect of this story over the past few days has been the Queen's love of Scotland and how that is being reflected back by the Scottish people. You will see that. We're seeing it this morning. We will see it this afternoon and tomorrow. That connection, that unique connection and relationship between a monarch and their people, especially here in Scotland, the sense of gratitude that people have. I was down at the Palace of Holyrood House yesterday. Loads of people were coming down with flowers and messages of condolences, determined to show that gratitude, to show what Her Majesty meant to the people of Scotland. And I think that's going to be absolutely crystallised by the scenes that we see here in Edinburgh in the next 48 hours or so.
Quite. I think you're absolutely right. Neil, thank you very much indeed. Hugo is here in the studio and has been with us all morning. Good to have you with us, Hugo. And also Sarah Griswood, a royal commentator, is joining us, I'm sure, glued to your screen, as we all are, Sarah, watching the very moving passage of the Queen's coffin and the cortege as it makes its way towards Aberdeen, starting, of course, in Balmoral. It's a difficult day for many, a chance to pause and reflect as this official mourning period begins, and we all get the chance to actually see the coffin, which crystallises for many the reality of her passing in a different way, perhaps, than even just that announcement. But also, it's a crucial day for King Charles III, not least that he is the top of the list of those that will be feeling the sadness of his mum's passing, but also because it's very important for his role as king and that accession process, isn't it, Sarah?
Yes, absolutely. These first days are all about two different things for the royal family, the royal establishment. Saying goodbye to Queen Elizabeth, but also ushering in the new king, King Charles. And there's a lot of business going on behind and beneath the ceremonial.
Of course there is, and one of those things is the meeting with the Commonwealth Secretary, Secretary-General, the Right Honourable Patricia Scotland. I was going to say QC, but of course it's KC now. It's King's Council, isn't it? It's all those things that we are adjusting ourselves to. And that meeting will be crucial for the new king to ensure that the Commonwealth expanded so wonderfully and with so much pride the Queen had in that expansion from where it started as just a few countries to 56 countries. She passionately wanted that to continue, as King Charles has also said he wants it to continue.
Well, of course, a few years before her death, the Queen took the unusual step of making it known that she very much hoped her son, Charles, would succeed her as head of the Commonwealth. It's not a hereditary position. That happened, but nonetheless, there are question marks. We know that some countries, certainly who acknowledge the Queen as their head of state, may no longer wish to do so, may have been thinking. Jamaica, for example. And of course, it is possible that some also will not feel the same tie to the Commonwealth. So I think to this morning's meeting and, meeting the various representatives from Commonwealth countries will only be the first in a very long process in which the new king, although he's always said, as his mother did, that it's up to the nations whether or not they wish this connection with the British sovereign. It's up to them, but I'm sure there'll be a great deal of effort behind the scenes quietly to try and make these countries feel that the link is still worthwhile.
Absolutely. We have Hugo here, and I know you want to comment on that because don't go anywhere, Sarah. We'll return to you because we want to talk to you some more. But Hugo, that is something that the Queen was so passionate about. And so today, even as his mother's coffin begins that official mourning process, King Charles is very busy too at securing that legacy.
Well, absolutely. I spent a lot of time going through the Commonwealth because we have a scheme putting Commonwealth walkways in, a small way of uniting people. But I think there's a distinction to be made here because the Queen and Prince Philip always said, we'll go quietly, particularly if they don't want to have their head of state anymore. And please remember that the Queen presided over something like 45 independences as the different countries took on their own status. But there's something different with the Commonwealth. It is a very, very precious and wonderful link. And a lot of countries are wanting to join, and I think that will be all right. And I think that it's very, very important that it is, because there are trading possibilities, there are sporting possibilities. It's a way of uniting the world. And when, you know, we've had the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham recently, and countries sent delegates to athletes from all over the place, and fantastic that they should compete in sport rather than in other ways.
And we all enjoy that very much this year.
Absolutely.
It was such a great, wonderful lift, seeing the athletes and competing at a time when we all really needed it, didn't we? So what then do you make of the timing that just moments after Charles III was confirmed as king, you've got King of Antigua and Barbuda suddenly saying, well, look, we are confirming that we're also going to hold a referendum on that. Well, it doesn't bode well, does it?
Well, I think what he actually said was, we're not going to do it for the next 3 years, but we're going to do it sometime. He's a pretty am I allowed to say he's a dodgy guy?
I don't know, but you have.
Anyway, yes.
You just
anyway,
have.
I mean, they're always quite often what
it's your opinion.
Well, I've met him. Quite often what these characters are up to in these countries, they're very often pushing something else under the carpet. I mean, they want to have their own status sort of, improved. But I don't think that's going to take Antigua out of the Commonwealth. I think that is very important, because that's a wonderful link which everybody has together. It's a family of nations, and they come together because they want to be together. And as you know, some countries have joined who weren't even, as you said earlier, actually, were part of the original British
Empire, which shows the desire from those. The other thing that dominates many of the papers this morning is what appears, I think, to many, Hugo, certainly to me, a rather wonderful response to, we know, the Queen's desire to see Prince Harry and Prince William, and the uncomfortableness that's taken place with Harry's departure with Meghan to America, to see that come to an end, and King Charles III so wonderfully in his speech stating, I want to send particularly my love to Harry and send him the best wishes, if you like, for continuing his life in America. We saw them coming together, apparently orchestrated by Prince William, at Windsor yesterday, what seemed to be very spontaneously, certainly not part of any official protocol for this time.
And I think that sometimes if people behave well together in public, it makes it easier for them to behave well together in private. They see, actually, you can do it. And let's hope that that's one of the good things that comes out of all this.
Yeah. And also, Sarah, what did you make of that? Because when we look at how we want the spirit and that sense of disconcert that everybody felt on the news of the Queen's passing, that feeling that she represented such consistency and constancy, and everybody wanted to forget perhaps some of the problems that have happened within the family generally, and the loss of her seemed to shake that. What did you make of seeing the four of them yesterday at Windsor, greeting the crowds together, looking at the messages from well-wishers together?
I think it was a very important moment because, as you say, the last thing the new King Charles would need is the continuation of that dissent within his family and that narrative in the press, who, of course, have always commented on, maybe even fostered it. And so it really was significant, I think, because, of course, the royal family, the ranks are a little thinner on the ground of popular senior working royals than they used to be. You know, the retirement and death of Prince Philip before the Queen, Prince Andrew's obvious departure from public life, Harry and Meghan's move. So it really is important that the family, this core family, did put on this very touching show of unity.
Quite, and that is what we all want to see going forward. What sort of king do you think King Charles III will be?
I think we got the clues in that very important again and very moving speech he made to the nation after his mother's death. It was very much on the one hand, but on the other. He praised his mother's love of tradition, but wholehearted acceptance of change. He spoke of how we're now a nation of many faiths and cultures, but affirmed his link to the Church of England. He said, he echoed the words many times, referenced them, of that speech his mother made on her 21st birthday, committing that her whole life would be spent in service. But then there was a move on, a twist. He said that he'd serve with respect, with loyalty, and with love. And I think that comes from the 21st century. I'm not sure that's something earlier monarchs, that word love, would necessarily have used. So I think it is all about, it always has been, a balancing act, a tightrope, if you like, between the old world, the world of the ceremony, the wonderful, protocols, and the new, the accessibility, and the feeling that the royal family is in touch with the rest of us. But I think it's clear now that he has spent a great deal of time in his many years during as Prince of Wales, as heir.
One of those, yes, which is one of the advantages. He may have felt there's many disadvantages, but of him having that time. Thank you so much indeed, Sarah. And Hugo, briefly, it is a difficult day, but an important one, isn't it, before we return to Balmoral, to Richard, as we watch this slow process?
Well, it's very final, isn't it? That's the thing. And it brings it home to us that the reign of Queen Elizabeth II is over. A reign which started with her coming down the steps in 1952 to meet Winston Churchill, born in 1874, and pretty much ended with her bringing in a Prime Minister who was born in 1975, 100 years later.
Well, let's go back to where that journey that's now continuing, getting ever closer to Aberdeen, goes on, and talk to the man who was there where it all started, Richard Gaisford.
Yeah, Kate, really emotional actually when those gates opened, knowing that the Queen's coffin was going to be seen by the world for the first time. And as it came out, everyone here fell silent. And just metres really from where we stood, I watched that coffin with the Royal Scottish Standard draped over it coming past us. And then in the car behind, it was Princess Anne, the Queen's daughter, and she was so still, so stoic, sat there next to her husband, Sir Tim Lawrence, and they now have a 6-hour journey all the way down to Edinburgh via Aberdeen and Dundee, pausing at places for people to join them. It is quite a day here and will continue to be so as members of the public now arrive at the gates to pay their respects, adding to a growing number of flowers that have been left outside.
Yes, and I'm sure those scenes will be reproduced all along the way, Richard. And that is it from this special Good Morning Britain programme. The journey will continue, and Julie Etchingham is next.
Big thank you to Kate and the Good Morning Britain team. You're watching a special programme on ITV News where we're going to stay with these beautiful pictures from Aberdeenshire as the Queen's cortege moves slowly through Scotland towards Edinburgh, the farewell to her beloved land, winding through the Highlands she adored, through Ballater on the River Dee, where we've witnessed extraordinary scenes this morning. Neighbours who cherished her bid their goodbyes from their corner of the Cairngorms. The streets were lined with those wishing to pay their respects. As you'll see, the cortege is now making its way through Aberdeenshire towards Aberdeen itself, where people have been invited to come to witness this journey. The tributes in the city will be led by the Lord Provost of Aberdeen in his role as the Lord Lieutenant. And after Aberdeen, the cortege will pass south to Dundee and then on to Edinburgh, where she will lay at rest until Tuesday. After that, she will be moved again to London, where the Queen will lie in state. Well, alongside me in the studio, whilst we watch the pictures unfolding in Aberdeenshire. We have three guests: Professor Robert Hazel from the Constitutional Unit at the University College London, historian Anna Whitelock, and the former political advisor Aisha Hazarika. Well, today is a real chance of the people for Scotland to come together to bid the Queen farewell. It is also a moment when the new King's proclamation, which we saw in that moment of history unfold in the capital, London, yesterday, the ripples from which now spread out across the country, and there will be proclamations in Edinburgh, in Cardiff, and at Hillsborough Castle in Northern Ireland, where the new king will be proclaimed to those who are gathering there. It is the day 2 of the ceremonial aspect of the new monarchy, a constitutional moment. All the way through, of course, we have this strange pull-push between the images of the late Queen that we're witnessing now and the country adjusting to a new monarchy and the new King Charles III. So our three guests are beautifully poised to take us through these various events which are unfolding before us as we stay on these pictures. Aisha, I might just come to you first, if I may. This is your beloved homeland, of course. To see the cortege winding through this scenery, it's utterly beautiful, isn't it?
It is, and I feel it's incredibly poignant because we all know that the Queen treasured Scotland and Balmoral was beloved to her. And it feels very fitting that her sort of final gift to Scotland is to show the world exactly why she fell in love with Scotland so much. I've had people messaging from all over the world saying, my goodness, Scotland is looking absolutely beautiful. It's gleaming in this beautiful autumnal sunshine. It also feels like the first day of autumn, which is symbolic. And I think in many ways, the Queen's final gift is probably a bit of a gift to the Scottish Tourist Board as well right now, because she's showing the world, this is the place that I loved the most.
Yeah, and it's amazing, isn't it? I mean, the cortege has really mapped the flow of the River Dee. There's something really very profound about it.
There is, and also I think what's very interesting is that very unique relationship she had with the people in that community around Balmoral in Aberdeenshire. A local person said very movingly, the country may feel that they've lost their monarch, we have lost our neighbour and friend. And all around that particular part of the world, you just had to tap somebody on the shoulder and they would have a personal story about meeting the Queen. She was not remote and distant. She was very much she was part of that Highland community.
Yeah, and much beloved there, of course. Anna, from a historian's point of view, for this to be the first part of her last great journey, as the new king has described it, is quite something, isn't it?
I mean, it really is. My sort of historian's mind is in overdrive, as well as just watching and feeling quite full with just the emotion of the scenery, really. I mean, I think back to actually what Queen Victoria, previously the longest reigning monarch, had said of Scotland as the most beautiful country in the world. I mean, she was the one in many ways who, in the modern era, forged this bond between England and the English crown and the Scottish people. And of course, historically, that wasn't always the case. They were warring kingdoms. And so it's always been a sort of slightly difficult relationship to curate. Victoria and her love for Balmoral and the Scottish countryside and of Prince Albert, that really did help to cement those bonds. And of course, the Queen and the late Prince Philip loved Balmoral. On his death, she released that picture of them together at Balmoral. And I do think, royal process, the movement of royal bodies in life and death are really important. They're powerful. And this is, as Aisha said, it's beautifully curated, but also there is real resonance at the moment when questions about the union are in full sway. And we remember back perhaps to the Queen's comment on the eve of the Scottish referendum, think carefully. And it's as if she's saying, and look, think what you might be giving up, and this bond and this relationship
it was just
between
that one
the two.
moment, wasn't it? It's extraordinary.
That one, really. And so, as you said, we have got these two journeys going on at the moment, these two operations, as it were. We've got Operation Unicorn, which sounds very sort of procedural, and it is all about the movement of the late Queen's body out of Scotland back down to London, whilst at the same time we have Operation Springtide, the accession of Charles and the proclamations and the beginning of his journeys too.
Yes, and that's a perfect point to come over to you, Robert, our constitutional guru for the morning, because we should mention that within the next half an hour, and we'll be crossing to various places around the country to witness some of it, we're going to see the proclamations in each of the contingent parts of the United Kingdom, Scotland,